All right, everybody. So let's go ahead and start. I will open up by saying that I am Bruce Tudor from the California Air Resources Board. I am a supervisor in our Mobile Source Control Division. That division is responsible for most of our heavy-duty vehicle regulations, both off-road and on-road. In addition, we are responsible for most of our heavy-duty incentive programs and some other things. So today, as you know, this is our truck regulation implementation group. We will be going through some presentations where we'll be explaining a little bit more about how this group operates, the intention of the group, and so forth. So I won't go into that really right now. However, I think what I'd like to start with is an introduction by our co-chairs of who they are and what they do. Then we will move into an introduction by our panel members. And again, we'll discuss a little bit later more about panel members and audience members. But panel members also, please, if you can, keep the introduction short, about a minute or so. We really want to get to our discussion as soon as we can. But we also want to make sure that the panel members who really are kind of the key to this, have a chance to get to know each other. Let us know who you are. We'll then move into presentations, then a discussion, and then ultimately into next steps, what we want to do moving forward. So, having said that, I will say also, I believe we sent an email to all of the panelists on Friday with a link to the presentation, or I should say a link to the webpage for this group, which has the presentation and has the agenda and some other information. And I don't think that was dropped into chat, but maybe Stephen or Yusuf, if you're on, could you drop a link to that basically the trig page into the chat so anybody can access it?
Yes, I can do that.
Thank you. Perfect. All right. So, having said that, why don't we move over to introductions by our co-chairs? And Renee, I'm going to call on you first. And please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Bruce. Hello, everybody. I'm so glad to participate here in this group. I received an invitation from Carl just to participate as co-chair, and well, let me introduce a little bit myself. I'm working on the homologation, compliance and regulation in Volkswagen Truck and Bus Mexico. I'm responsible for to homologate every vehicle to introduce to Mexico before to sales in the market. And also I participate in the committee for ANPAC. Miguel Ogazon is our director for this technical committee, and well, we participate in this committee in order to make the regulations or to plan the regulation in Mexico. So today we are participating in this important group. It's really very a good experience right now, just to share with you the knowledge for everyone, and just to retrieve the best of the efforts in order to participate with CARF group. Thank you very much, Bruce. Thank you very much, everybody.
You're on mute, Bruce.
The new words of the 21st century. I'm sorry, Jael. Thank you, Renee. And Jael, would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks. Hi, everyone. So nice to meet you all. I'm Jael Lichel. I do work at the University of California, Alianza, Mexico, which is a UC system-wide initiative. I'm talking about this later. As the Strategic Research Initiative Coordinator, I'm also responsible for the Zero Emission Vehicles Project at Alianza, which is a strategic research initiative. For that, I'm responsible for coordinating and engaging with binational stakeholders, non-academic stakeholders, participating in this initiative. We do have 3 sub-working groups: the light-duty vehicles working group, the medium and heavy-duty vehicles working group, which is the one that brought me here, and the electromobility in cities working group. I'm also responsible for achieving the initiative's objectives, planned activities, promoting communication and liaison with the research team, so we can address strategic issues through research that is being conducted by UC researchers. For example, we do have this light-duty vehicles research at UC Davis, and the medium and heavy-duty vehicles research on UC Riverside. So thank you for the invitation. I'm so glad that I'm here, and I can see so many people from our working group. So nice to meet you all, and thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jael. Okay. So now what I would like to do is go around and give our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves. Again, if you will, keep it relatively short, that will help us on time. Although we are a little bit smaller than some of the other implementation groups, and we'll show you those other implementation groups in a bit. So, having said that, though, just so that you know, in case you don't, for those of you that want to see who the panelists are, if panelists you want to see specifically who's on the panel, if you don't know and you go down to the bottom of your screen and click on participants, you will get a window up over probably on the right-hand side, and you can see panelists. You can click on either panelists or attendees, and so that way you can see exactly who was on the panel. So just so that you know. All right, so I am going to start going down, and I'm just going to kind of go alphabetically here for introductions of our panelists. Alejandra Mieriatran, would you introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. My name is Alejandra Miriteran. I'm the Executive Director of the Otay Mesa Chamber of Commerce. We're an industrial community right on the border in San Diego, California. And I'm very much looking forward to working with all of you. And our goal is to make sure this zero emission transition works for our border constituents. And obviously that includes supply chains and people engaged in trade, since we have more than $60 billion of two-way trade crossing through Otay Mesa every year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alejandra. All right, and then next would be Alfonso Esquer.
Good morning. My name is Alfonso Esquer. I am a part owner with my family of 2 trucking companies that are engaged in international loads. Over 30 years of experience doing this type of loads, and not only cross-border loads, but we go intra-US also and intra-Mexico. Thank you for having me. Hopefully I can say something that can be helpful for the goals of this group. Thank you.
I'm sure you'll be very valuable. Thank you. All right. Next would be Angel Yin.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Angel Yin. I'm policy analyst with BYD Ride. So we are a global EV manufacturer with operation both in North America and South America. So we are happy to be here and look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. All right. And next is Chelsea Lee.
Hi, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Chelsea Lee, and I'm an associate with Better World Group. I was Better World Group's day-to-day lead supporting the Advanced Clean Fleets Advocacy Coalition. We now represent the more than 30 organizations that are supportive of the successful implementation of CARB ZEV trucks rules. Thank you for creating this space for us to collaborate today. I look forward to the discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chelsea. All right. Next on the list here is Glenn Cho.
Good morning. Oh, sorry. Good morning. My name is Glenn Cho. I'm with the Regulatory Affairs Office for Toyota Motors North America. Toyota has a significant presence in Tijuana, Mexico, and also is impacted by this California's Advanced Clean Fleet Rule. We do a lot of cross-border commerce to support our Tacoma production. So I'm grateful to be invited and welcome to address any questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Glenn. All right. Next would be Miguel Ogazon, please.
Hey, thank you for the invitation. I am Miguel Ogazon. I am the Technical and Engineer Director for ANPACT. ANPACT, well, we represent heavy-duty vehicles, OEMs, vans, buses, and trucks here in Mexico. So we are very into what's happening in California, how these regulations will have effects here in Mexico. And well, we need to know what's happening in order to comply to for our clients' needs, and also the regulation matters that this will bring to our country. So again, thanks for the invitation.
Excellent. All right. Thank you very much. Then next on my list would be Nick Badillo.
Hi, good morning. My name is Nick Badillo, and I'm a Clean Transportation Policy Manager at SDG&E. I've worked in the clean transportation space for about 8 years now, both in the light, medium, and heavy-duty sector. And here at the utility, we're looking to support border transit through many of our program offerings, as long as you're within our service territory. So look forward to the conversation, and thank you for having us.
Great. Thank you, Nick. All right. And Monique Lopez, please introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. Monique Lopez with the San Diego Air Pollution Control District in their Office of Environmental Justice. We have been working closely with the community at the international border, and heavy-duty trucks is one of their top 5 priorities that the community is interested in learning more and being more involved in.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Monique. And I had the pleasure of meeting you just the other day down in San Diego. All right, those of you that have looked at the panelist list, you will see some other folks on there. Those are CARB staff. I'm not going to go through and have them introduce themselves, but I do want to let you know that they are all on board here to support, to maybe work with the presentations, whatever the case is. So those are who all those folks are. Really great group of people. And thank you all for being part of this meeting. All right. One other thing just to bring up. So we have a number of audience members on. In fact, quite a few. I see there's about 78 attendees. I'm sorry, 63 attendees. I was looking at the wrong list. Outside of the panelists. Please feel free to go ahead and provide a brief introduction in the chat down at the bottom of your screen. We really want to know who's online, want to get to know you. We'll talk a little bit more about how you can participate during the slide presentation. But again, please go ahead and feel free to Sorry, I was just looking at a couple things. Let's see. I have unavailable. Oh, okay. I was looking at a couple of questions to make sure I wasn't missing something that people had submitted. All right, great. So again, please feel free to go ahead and enter that information in the chat. Just so the chat doesn't get huge, again, please try and keep it fairly short. And we will go ahead and then shut that chat feature off for audience members in about 10 minutes or so. We'll open it back up later after presentations. But there's also the Q&A. If you do have questions, that is where, or really I should say comments, that's where I'd like you to enter those into the Q&A. And again, that is for audience members. Panelists, you should have access to both chat and Q&A the entire time. But again, if you have comments, if you want to participate as an audience member, please use the Q&A feature. Okay, I believe that we are just about ready for our first presentation. Oh, and also so that you know, one of our staff is having a little bit of internet problems, at least only one at the moment. We know that's part of the new world as well. If there's a break in the presentations, please forgive us. We'll get somebody over and substitute it on to show that presentation. So, Brianna, if you could go ahead and bring up the main presentation for the group. All right, great, thank you. All right, so I have, whoops, I'm sorry, I just lost it. All right, so I've already introduced myself and the name of this effort. It is the Truck Regulation Implementation Group. There are a number of them, 4 to be exact, and there'll be a slide in a moment that shows that. But these groups, and I'll probably be reiterating this as we go through the presentation, but these groups, the real purpose of these is to discuss how best to implement this regulation, to get ideas and recommendations on how this can best be implemented from the viewpoint of all sides. We have a pretty diverse number of panelists online, so I'm hoping to have a very good discussion about how best that can happen. Can I get the next slide, please? All right, thank you, Brianna. Just very briefly, a little bit of background about the Advanced Clean Fleet Regulation. First of all, that has been adopted by our board. It was adopted back in late April. In addition, there's another step that it had to go through, which is just part of the legal process that we are required to go through, and that is the Office of Administrative Law. They have to look at the text and make sure that everything is legal, and they went ahead and approved that in October. So this regulation is in place, and as I said, today is really about how to best implement that regulation. How do we work with border communities? How do we work with fleets? And again, we'll get into that a little bit more in a moment. Who does it affect? You'll see it on there. I won't go in too much, but it says there, vehicles with a gross vehicle weight rating of greater than 8,500 pounds. What does that mean? If you're not a truck nerd like myself, you may not speak, 8,500 pounds and classes and so forth, but basically you're looking pretty much at a Ford F-350 and bigger, all the way up to full semis. There are some trucks that are even a little bit smaller that could fall into this, but that's pretty much, again, Ford F-350, Chevy 3500, whatever the case is, that's pretty much what you're looking at. And this pertains to any fuel type vehicle. Who does it apply to? These are the 3 categories it applies to. It applies to drayage fleets, and I'll mention something about them in a moment, state and local government fleets, and fleets that have either $50 million or more in gross annual revenue, or that own or operate 50 or more trucks. And there's something else called common ownership and control. And I'll give a basic illustration of that in just a moment as well. But two things I did want to point out here. One of them, drayage fleets. That's really critical at the border. And the reason I say that is because I know that crossings such as Otay Mesa are land ports of entry. Same with Calexico, and with any of the crossings are considered land ports of entry. Oftentimes the trucks that cross there may be considered drayage. However, for the purpose of our regulation, drayage is only trucks that visit maritime seaports or intermodal rail yards. The fact that they come across the border, again, for purposes of are they subject to the drayage piece of the regulation, coming across the border does not make them subject to that drayage piece of the rule. Now, let me talk about just briefly this common ownership and control thing, just so that all the panelists and the audience have an understanding. I've said, first of all, there's these private fleets, high priority fleets is what we call them, 50 million or more in revenue and have some trucks, or common ownership and control over trucks. And I know that's a, that is it's a very in-depth, or I should say a complicated concept, but we're not going to get into explaining the rule today. We have other venues where we do that, various webinars and so forth. But or 50 or more trucks, or again, this idea of common ownership and control, so that you understand it, because that may be a critical part of this conversation. I use a very, very basic example. Again, it gets a lot more involved than this, but the basic example is someone like an Amazon, right? Amazon, I think we know that Amazon, a lot of the trucks that deliver packages to our houses or haul their freight are not actually owned by Amazon. However, they work for Amazon. They pretty much do nothing but Amazon controls their movements. They may be using Amazon's transportation authority, their DOT numbers or their CA number for California trucks. That's the basic, again, kind of the high level, simple explanation of what common ownership and control is. So there may be companies that don't have trucks, but make more than $50 million or more in revenue and have common ownership and control over some trucks. They might be subject to the regulation as well. All right, next slide, please, Brianna. All right, purpose of the TRIG. First of all, successful implementation of the ACF regulation. And it says ACF regulation is written. That's really, really critical. This is not a group to discuss changes to the regulation. That has to be done in a regulatory process. Now, though, the two main efforts that we have going on are explaining what the regulation requires. Again, we have webinars and so forth that are doing that. And now these groups to, again, bring the parties together and discuss how best to implement this regulation. We want really constructive dialogue. This is a great group of people. We've done meetings like this in the past for other regulations. They work very well. We have a lot of good dialogue. Create and foster relationships between the people that are impacted by the rule. That's why we had folks introduce themselves, and that's why we're asking folks, even in the audience, to provide a brief introduction so that we know the players, who is involved in this. And then finally, we develop recommended actions and key issues. And these are key issues in how does this get implemented and recommendations on how it can best be implemented at the border. And I think that discussion will kind of evolve as we move forward. Next slide, please, Brianna. All right. Member expectations. And I'm really referring to the panelists at this point. Please attend all the meetings, and we'll talk about future meetings at the end. But please attend all the meetings. It's really critical to have your ongoing input, constructive, relevant issues. Try and keep it to how can we best implement this rule. I think we've got a great group of panelists. I really think that we'll have positive, proactive, and very solution-oriented discussions. Again, that's really what these groups are for, is how do we make this work? And last, and I've said this before, but I also said I would probably repeat it a number of times, it is not a platform to discuss changes to the regulation. That has to be done in a regulatory environment. Next slide, please. All right. Member roles. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how the group is going to work. The members, and when I say members, I'm talking about the panelists. This is going to be a roundtable discussion. And really, again, we want people from the different parts of the industry or community or whatever to have that discussion. Once we get through presentations, I'm going to turn most of this discussion over to the co-chairs. I want this to be a discussion between peers. That's our goal here. Panelists, please provide input. What we're going to ask you to do is to use the raise hand function. And then our co-chairs will call on you for your input. Otherwise, it's a little difficult when we're online if we don't do something like use the raise hand function. You do have access to your mic, to your video. As you know, you've already used that. Public participants, so the audience members right now, you will have access. You'll be able to listen to the discussion, and as we said, we want you to be able to have access to the Q&A, and you can provide input through that. We may or may not get to a verbal discussion with the audience later, but please also feel free to use the panelists, panelists that maybe represent your industry, to provide input as well. All right, next slide, please. The 4 groups I mentioned, as you'll see, there's 2 today. We're the very first group. For better or for worse, you're going to have to work with me as we work through maybe some issues. I hope not. Border communities is the first group today. We'll be discussing infrastructure later today. That's a separate group. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't discuss it here. Obviously, infrastructure is a big issue. There are some unique challenges at the border, but also part of what we will do in these groups is we'll bring information from, let's say, the infrastructure group back to this group, or vice versa. Take concerns or ideas from this group over to the infrastructure group to discuss there. On December 8th, so this Friday, there's our last 2 groups. Outreach. Again, anybody here can participate or at least attend those group meetings to see what's being said. We've done a lot of outreach, and I'll show you a little bit that we've done at the border. That's one of the things that I do is outreach. But that's our 3rd group. And then finally, Friday afternoon will be the rule provisions group. That discusses in large part the various exemptions and extensions that are in the regulation. Okay, next slide, please. All right, collaboration with the border communities. That's really all what today is about. Can I have the next slide, please, Brianna? All right, so what is the purpose of this communities group? And when I say border communities, we're referring to anyone that has an interest in the border, whether it be from the goods movement standpoint, whether it be from the actual community standpoint, whatever the case is, anyone impacted by this. And as I've said, this is to provide guidance and information on how we can best meet the regulatory requirements. The requirements are there. We cannot change those outside of a rule process. So how do we make that work best? Work with border fleets on solutions. That's exactly what today is about. That's this TRIG group. Coordinate discussions with state agencies and others. So information, input on maybe who we should try and bring into the discussion. We've had a lot of coordination with some of our other sister agencies in the state, such as the California Energy Commission, California Public Utilities Commission, Department of Transportation, and so forth. And CEC, the California Energy Commission, is a critical part of this, as they are the overseers of infrastructure. Okay. And the last thing here, explore and coordinate opportunities. That is really the biggest thing, as I've said, that we're talking about here. Opportunities to make this work as best as we can. Next slide, please. Just to give you an idea, some of the things that we have done, and these are just border specific things. We've conducted a number of meetings, many through the Otay Chamber Mesa of Commerce. They've been a great partner to work with, really helping us try and get the word out and facilitating conversation. We've also had a number of events down there. Otay Mesa outreach event, we were down to talk about the regulation, explain the regulation, get input on the regulation. Same thing, advanced clean fleets training. And we did also just recently have what we call a ride and drive event. We'll have more in that area as well. Ride and drives are really great. We have CARB staff and others out there to talk about the rule, explain the requirements. There are vendors there that might, represent things such as charging companies or companies that will help you get your fleet ready for zero emissions. And we have trucks there that you can actually drive. So those are kind of cool. You can jump in a full-size semi and drive it around the lot. Next slide, please. All right, here are some of the things that I think are really, really critical in today's discussion and in ongoing discussions. Okay? Communications channels. How do we work with fleets both on the US side of the border and especially on the Mexico side of the border? What are the best channels to work through? How can we get information out? Barriers to incentives and financing. We want to hear about those. And we've had a lot of discussions with folks, but how do we overcome some of those barriers? What are the ideas and suggestions that you have? Technology and innovation opportunities. Again, what are some ideas that folks have? I'll tell you, there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there looking at how to, to bring charging into an area, to bring hydrogen into an area, to bring the vehicles into the area and operate them as best as possible. Academic research and data analysis, that's really Jail's specialty, and I will defer a lot of that to her. And finally, recommendations. Really, recommendations is the recommendations on these things that I've just mentioned and others. We want to hear from the panel. I don't want you to think that our discussion is limited to these things. Is there something else that you think we should bring into the discussion to better implement this regulation? All right, and the last slide, and this one we'll bring up later, really. I just wanted to bring it up for now so that you know what we're doing. Next slide, Brianna. There we are. Perfect. All right. We'll be discussing future meetings, when to hold them, how to hold them. This idea of, is there more research and additional data that's required? And again, that's really Jail's specialty. Getting information to the group. How do you, the group, want to get information to you and get information back to us? And then what are some of the things we should discuss as we go forward in future meetings? All right. I'm done with my presentation. So I think let's turn it over to Renee next. And Renee, would you, first of all, Brianna, would you bring up Renee's presentation? And Renee, would you give your presentation? All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, just talking about Volkswagen Truck and Bus Mexico. We belong to Triton Group. Triton Group is the commercial brand, the commercial company dedicated for truck and buses for Volkswagen AG. Volkswagen AG in Germany in 2018, 2019, set this corporation, this Triton group, in order to comply the different sectors of automotive industry. In this case, Triton Group is dedicated absolutely for truck and buses. So if we move to the next slide, please. Yeah, right now, Triton Group is gathered those brands. Volkswagen Camiones Omnibuses is from Brazil. Scania is a Sweden brand, and MAN is a Germany brand, and Navistar is also the new brand that is incorporated to the Volkswagen Group. So we are working together in order to share the same technology. Is the topic of the moderation to implement the new technology for different brands, and at the end the same technology is make better the difference between the between brands. It's the same platform, it's the same components, but at the end every brand have the own personality. So the main topic here is Volkswagen is trying to incorporate the same technology and explore in different parts of the world with these brands the best of the solution. So the next slide, please. Well, we are located in Querétaro, Mexico. Querétaro is our facilities. In Mexico, we are producing or commercializing two brands. In this case, we are we are commercializing Volkswagen Truck and Bus and MAN. Next slide, please. Yeah, those are the brands that we are commercializing in Mexico. We are working together also with some colleagues from Scania and Navistar, but at the end, Volkswagen Truck and Bus Mexico is responsible to introduce those vehicles in Mexico, MAN and Camiones Omnibuses Volkswagen. So next slide, please. Yeah, in this case, our lineup in Mexico for truck and buses, we move to the next, please. We have the three families for trucks. Just for the Volkswagen vehicles, we have the delivery family and the Constellation family. We share the medium trucks and high duty trucks, and for the side of MAN, we have the DGX, which is let's say this truck is from 18 tons to 44 tons as gross weight, but they have the capability to transport 120 tons for the complete weight vehicle. So with these families of vehicles, we attend the different sectors in Mexico, and we choose together with the customer what is the best option, just to according with the operation that they have. The next slide, please. Also, for the buses, we have the complete categories for this kind of vehicles. We start for school buses, which is 9 tons above. The shuttle bus and city bus are the same category. Let's say category 7, category or class 8. And of course, we have long distance buses or coaches that is dedicated for the main operators in Mexico. So with this lineup of vehicles, we deploy at the end the best option with a solution for the customers, and well, is what we are working here in Mexico, and we offer those kind of vehicles. Thank you. There is the last slide, I think. Thank you very much.
Great, Renee, thank you so very much. Before, I do see also, Alfonso, you have a question. Would you like to go ahead and ask it?
Yes, on these trucks that are being they are being sold in Mexico. The components of the trucks not related to the powertrain, are they USDOT approved? I'm talking about tires, wheels, brake systems, all the parts that have to have an approval from DOT to be part of a truck and be driven in US and or California. Do these trucks have those approvals? Can you please tell me? Thank you.
You know, I will say just really quickly that I know that a number of the vehicles that are sold in the States are manufactured in Mexico. Whether or not they have a different manufacturing line, I don't know. Renee, maybe you can answer that a little better.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for the question. Well, right now we don't have approval for DOT for this kind of vehicles. Just those vehicles have the European certification or Brazilian certification, depends on the origin for those vehicles. But at the end, with the European certification, are aligned with the US regulation. So we can if one customer wants to have those vehicles to circulate in US, is possible because the regulation from Europe and US are a little bit similar and comply with all of them. But at the end, we can explore a little bit more in detail what is the best the requirements for each vehicle and the operation. So the answer is yes, it's possible, but we need to explore what is the best solution for in detail according with the requirements.
Great, thank you, Renee. And Alfonso, thank you for that question as well. I think that will be something that we may want to discuss as we move on through the group. Miguel.
Yeah, just to answer to fulfill what you say, here in Impact, we're a little bit more than the 80% of our production is for exportation, and 95% of these exports goes to US. And well, the vehicles that go to US comply with the regulation of US, the country for the United States. So from Impact, all buses and trucks that go to US comply with the regulation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And you see, this is exactly the value of a group like this. We've got folks that have the right questions, the right answers. That's fantastic. Let me throw in a couple things before we move on to Jail's presentation. I had a chance to catch up on the chat a little bit. First of all, someone asked about recording. Yes, we are recording this, and those recordings will be available at the link that I believe was dropped into chat very early on. That link is to the various group web pages, and this one, of course, is the border group. Alejandra, I see your hand up, and we'll get right there. Presentations, someone asked about that. Our presentation is online at that same link. The presentations from our two co-chairs, we can see if we can get them to you. We're not able to post them on that link, but we can see if we can distribute them. All right, and I see Alejandra's hand up. What I'm going to ask is we'll take this last question, and then I'd like to move on to Gio's presentation, and then we can get into the real meat of the discussion. Also, Alfonso, and I know there's a way I can probably do this, but I haven't found it. I don't think you have any more questions. Could you lower your hand, please? All right, Alejandra, please.
Yes, thank you, Bruce. And it's related to this last subject. I know you put the topics that we want to discuss, and one that I think we might want to add, and it's related to, I believe, what Miguel and Rene were talking about, is at least what I think is the lack of charging zero emission infrastructure in Mexico, specifically in Baja California, which is where our truckers that will be going into California are. So I'm curious, I'm interested in, it's interesting to see that they are selling zero emission vehicles in Mexico. Can you address the charging? Where are they being charged? And have you sold any in Baja California? Because to my knowledge, there are no charging stations in Baja or no immediate plans to set them up.
Thank you, Alejandra. And that will be, I think, a great topic when as we start discussing how to implement this regulation as best as we can, what we need. And part of that discussion might be, what are the conversations that need to happen with folks such as the state of Baja or the federal government of Mexico. And that's all of this is about how do we bring solutions about. Okay. All right. What I would like to do now then is move on to our second co-chair and our last presentation of the day, and that is Gio. Breeneth, would you please? Perfect. You've already done it, of course. And Gio, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Hi again. Well, as I said before in my introduction, I do work for UC Alianza MX, which is a University of California system-wide initiative. Alianza develops and strengthens partnerships with binational academic, government, and industry stakeholders, both in California and Mexico, to first of all advance knowledge on issues of mutual interest, binational interest. Second, prepare the next generation of leaders. And last, serve as a resource for key decision makers and provide a model for bilateral collaboration. We do work with all 10 UC campus, but UC Riverside is our executive sponsor. We have permanent funding support from the UC Office of the President, and Alianza is a program that was established back in 2019, but is integrating pre-existing system-wide programs with UC as the UC Institute for Mexico and the United States, better known as UC Mexus, the UC Mexico Initiative, and Casa de la Universidad de California in Mexico, which is a facility. It's a house, a beautiful house in Mexico City that is from UC. So it's Alianza takes these three initiatives, and we do work with several stakeholders. Most of you, Unpacked, Ford, other OEMs, the private sector. In the US with SDG&E, we have worked with water systems in Mexico, with governments both in Mexico and California as CaliPA, CARB, Conagua, NatBank, IMTA in Mexico, a lot of ministries here in Mexico, and with non-profit and NGOs, for example, within different sectors or international organizations such as the RRI, International Conservation International, ICM, and others, and of course with a lot of academic institutions in Mexico. Could you go next, please? Oh, I was saying this. I just said this, and can you go to the next, please? So we do have three main areas in Alianza as an initiative. Mobility exchange with students, the use of CASA itself, and the research area which I belong to, the research collaboration is what I'm going to talk to you a little bit today. So can you go to the next one, please? We do have a lot of initiatives going on. We're supporting a lot of research through the UC system in very different areas, from Alzheimer's disease to biochem and medicine, public health, migration, and others. Can you go to the next, please? But we do have strategic research and Latino studies project, which are the most important in terms of binational interest. And one of these is the zero emission transition. We are sponsoring, we're funding two research right now, one on light duty vehicles, the other one on heavy duty vehicles. And this is why we are here as UC Alianza MX. Can you go to the next, please? There is an initiative, the US-Mexico Task Force on Zero Emission Vehicles. It was launched on February 2022 as a multi-stakeholder coalition. It was launched by UC Alianza, the UC Institute for Transportation Studies at Davis, and the Mexican Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In the first year, it was developed a document that was launched a year after about diagnosis and recommendations for public policy for this transition in Mexico. Then we start working on these three working groups that I mentioned before, the light duty vehicles working group, the medium and heavy duty vehicles working group, and the public transport in cities working group. With this task force and with this group, we are willing to be this bridge and to build the collaboration between the UC researchers with these all stakeholders involved in this transition, not just, for example, like right here, not just the regulators, SCARP, but all the people and the institutions affected or participating in this transition. So next, please. We are funding now a specific project on the California-Mexico border zero emission vehicles infrastructure analysis for medium and heavy duty vehicles. For example, as Alejandra just asked, it's not just about selling a zero emission vehicle, but be sure that this vehicle will have charging stations, electricity, availability, or any other, for example, hydrogen if it's a fuel cell vehicle. So this project is going to evaluate charging and fueling infrastructure needs for this sector, and to make an inventory, to driving routes, to get to know more about these needs on infrastructure. So a lot of you are members of the technical advisory committee of this project. I'm so thankful for that. But also what I want to emphasize, can you go to the next place? is that this is why we are here. I mean, we do have a lot of research priorities for the upcoming years, but we do want to be in this group to get to know more about these needs on collaboration with the UC system in case that you identify like data or information or maybe a scientific support for any of the implementation challenges or ways or pathways to go through this transition. So thank you very much, Carl, for inviting us to be co-chairs, for being here, and thank you very much to everyone. Can you go to the next and the last one? You can visit our website to get to know more about these projects I'm talking about, and please let me know anything you want to know further. Thank you very much.
And Jael, thank you very much. So in just a moment, I am going to pretty much step out of this conversation and turn it over to our two co-chairs and our panelists. I did want to say one thing. I missed one of our panelists. I think there may have been a problem with them joining via the panelist link, but Israel Delgado, everyone else gave a quick introduction. I will absolutely want to give you a chance to give a brief introduction, who you are and what it is you do. I know Israel is a good guy, but Israel, if you could come on and do that, I'd appreciate that.
Hi, Bruce. Thank you very much. And good morning, everyone. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to be here with you, Bruce. I know you've been working so hard lately to bring all these programs in place. And my name is Israel Delgado. I'm a trucker carrier based in San Diego, and I represent the National Chamber of Transportation on the Southwest region, which is Sonora, Baja California, and Baja California South. So I've been participating mainly in the last forum about how can we join and make this effort with the Baja California government. And as a matter of fact, we just finished a study with the local scientists to find out where we are and what we need to do in order to comply. Of course, there are a lot of questions like the one that Mr. Sker just mentioned before, and about what Alejandra's question. It's very important about having in place where we're going to put all this infrastructure needed. And I think we have more questions than answers. So we will be working with all these initiatives and programs very close to make this transition smoother for all the trucking industry, especially in the Mexican side with California. So thank you for again, Bruce, for having me here, and I'll be waiting for my next chance.
Oh, great. Thank you, Israel. And you're right. It's solutions that we are here to talk about today. So as I said, I am going to pretty much step out of the conversation for now. We will come back probably about the last 15, maybe 20 minutes or so, and bring up that last slide of mine that you saw, which were the next steps, and discuss that. How do we want to hold the meetings? What are some topics and so forth? So that will leave us about 45 minutes or so of what I'm sure will be really great discussion. So I'm going to turn it over now to Renee and Jael.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Could you please help us putting on the slide on the topics we were supposed to be working on today? And
Sure.
I guess we can, yes, Alejandra, please go ahead.
And before that, Breeneth, go up just a slide, I think. Maybe two. One more. I think it's, yeah, okay. Go on down. It's the second from the last slide, I think is what they want. Thank you, Jael. Sorry about that. Yes, perfect.
Thank you. Go ahead, Alejandra.
Yes, particularly on the barriers to incentives and financing on this slide. One thing that came up in a meeting actually last week, and that I'd like to make as a recommendation, and hopefully, Bruce, we can figure out how to move forward with this in terms of action items, like what do we need to do to accomplish this, if we can, maybe by the next meeting. But it's basically, we have received feedback from some of our truckers. Unfortunately, not many of them have been moving forward with trying to transition at this moment, since they're not required to, but very few have. And for example, the CalSTART advisor, which is, I guess, for everyone here, is sort of like a free consultant that California is funding for truckers to figure out the incentives. They mainly have been focusing, I guess, on the HVIP incentive, which is by far probably the largest one, which is wonderful. But the feedback that we received is that they basically told the trucker, well, you can go to the HVIP site and figure it out. And with not a lot of detailed, I guess, consulting on this region specifically. As we know, there are state incentives, there are San Diego incentives by APCD, and I know they're here. And there's also the issue that Mexican operators apparently can qualify for incentives, but they have to follow a very specific process that I think the consultants need to know. So the recommendation is, if the state is funding these consultants through CalSTART, maybe regionalize it so the people that are helping the San Diego truckers and the cross-border truckers are aware of what the Mexican cross-border truckers need to do to qualify for the incentives, and are also aware of the San Diego APCD incentives, not just the California ones. And I think that in itself would be much more helpful for our community.
Thank you very much. We're going to write everything down, and yes, we can maybe at the end wrap everything up so we can make these recommendations, because yeah, this is a border issue and we need to make everything like very standardized and mostly, as you mentioned, let everyone know how this is going to work. So just going back a little bit, we need to figure out how, as this group, want to communicate to each other, just to keep moving the conversation, even if we're not having the meetings. I mean, between each meeting, and we can use email or a blog. This is, I guess, the first question that Renee and I want to really know if this is for you. It's a question. Do you want us to create like a mailing list or a group or so? Please let us know. I guess now, Bruce, all the panelists are able to open your mics and cameras, your video, so we can start like talking more with each other, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And also just one thing on that communication channels. Yes, communicating within this group is very critical, but I would also love to hear some discussion of what are the best ways to get information out to fleets especially on the Mexican side of the border. What are good ways to get it out to communities that may be interested in this? And so I would ask maybe that both of those types of topics, the internal communication and that external. Again, I think I said earlier, I do outreach. That's my life. I'd love to hear some suggestions.
Sure. Yes. Thanks for bringing that up. We need to figure out how to communicate within the group, but also how we're going to spread the word. I mean, every topic that we discuss here, or any kind of decision or feedback, increase, doubts, we surely need to go beyond and make this as public as possible. So if anyone has an idea or a suggestion, please let us know. And about the next one. Oh no. The next one that is here, barriers to incentives and financing. There's also the question that we need to identify first these barriers and then start talking about. So I don't know if someone else besides Alejandra has something to say or to suggest or to bring to the conversation today. Well, maybe not. Yeah, Alejandra, please.
I'm sorry, I know you said other than Alejandra, but since no one is raising their hand, I do know there's another issue that could be a challenge in the future, and we're really not aware because, again, most of our truckers have not moved forward with trying to access incentives. But the HVIP, I believe, has a requirement of 50% that the truck to be eligible for the HVIP has to be at least 50% of the time mileage wise in California. And because we're in a border area and because the air basin is exactly the same, when we have, for example, trucks waiting in the border or circulating in the Tijuana industrial area, it's certainly impacting California. And one potential recommendation may be similar to Assembly Bill 91, which now allows I guess local tuition in community colleges here in San Diego for Tijuana residents. Like, can we count our Baja truckers as California mileage? So this wouldn't be an issue in terms of complying, especially because the air basin is the same. So that's sort of one recommendation, because it could be a challenge in the future for these truckers to access the incentives.
Yeah, it's again, see this as a regional issue and not Mexico or California side, but within the basin. Yeah, this is interesting. I don't know if anyone in the panel want to say something about these barriers to incentives and financing.
Alfonso Esquer.
Yes, please go ahead.
Financing is a very important topic for the Mexican-based companies, because our government, the Mexican version of the IRS, which is Hacienda, wants the assets to be legal to be Mexicans, meaning that whatever trucks we have to buy, either we buy them in Mexico or we buy it outside Mexico and pay duties or import them to become Mexicans through the border. So the incentives plays a very big part, because the cost of the trucks, the current diesel truck versus the zero emission trucks, more so on the tractors, is 3.5 or more expensive than the current truck, the zero emission. So we have to have access to incentives, because a big percentage of the loads coming across the border are moved by Mexican domiciled tractors, which is the bulk of the loads. Straight trucks and vans are also in that pool, but at a lesser percentage. So we need to be sure what's going to happen here. And not only that, we need to have access to similar incentives in Mexico. As Israel stated, he's working with Baja to get them, but as we are today, to my knowledge, we haven't been able to get a program through Mexico.
Yeah, so this is going to be, we will need to work within financing schemes, but for both sides of the border. And it's going to be quite different because, like everything from the owners or the technology and the available credits and everything, it's quite different in Mexico. But yes, this is something that in one of the webinars in a couple of weeks ago with NatBank, we were talking about this possibility of bringing not bank as a binational, like they are the North American bank, development bank, so they can make something within this in mind. Thank you, Alfonso. We're taking notes. I don't know if someone else want to say something about barriers.
Yes, if I may I?
Yes.
Just say, well, first of all, I will talk at also as impact and also say that we do not sell vehicles, but we can be that figure that if you need information from the OEMs, we can give you those contact information in order that if you want to know about the different associates that we have and what are their financing plans that you already said. It's all about the vehicle. I can be the contact for that information. But also know that we need some a lot of support in infrastructure, in having these charging points. Maybe I know that some of our associates try to not only sell the vehicle but also these chargers, and but it's in a private way, not that only for helping that client in specific, but not in public grid. So at the end, well, if you want to need information for the OEMs that are in our association, I can be a link to give you or contact you with the person that of sales or the information that any holder may need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you are as an association, you're bringing everything together. This is quite important, I guess. And yeah, I don't know if there's someone else here willing to say something about barriers to incentives and financing, because what I'm seeing here, yes, go ahead, Alejandra. Okay.
Sorry again. But this one is also related to, I guess, incentives and financing, and unfortunately, I don't have a specific recommendation. I guess the recommendation is for this group to maybe analyze the specific regulation on for truck as a service. And Bruce, you might want to explain what that is, because I'm not going to do that. But it's certainly a new concept in the border. And I believe if there's an agency that wants to provide truck as a service, and they do have access to incentives, but they're very strict in terms of the regulations. And I don't believe they're incorporating it with the filter of this working in a border community. And I think that's really important, because if our truckers, for whatever reasons, are not able to comply, then at least they could possibly lease a truck through a truck as a service, assuming that works in the border environment. And I say that because our supply chains obviously are, many of our, I guess, manufacturers are CTPAT certified. So you would need to have to incorporate those kinds of federal programs into this, and just look at it with a border filter. And I don't think no one is doing that. So I guess my recommendation is we really need to look at that truck as a service program as an option and make sure it would work in the border. So I think there might be some modifications that would need to be made to that, and again, for a border environment.
And Alejandra, I will jump in. Thank you for asking about truck as a service. And first of all, I will say that is something else that this group can be very valuable in doing, is bringing the public-private partnerships into play. There are a lot of companies out there, and I said this earlier, that are really innovative and looking at different types of business models. What Alejandro was mentioning, and many of you may know, truck as a service, the business model varies. In its kind of most basic concept, it is a vehicle lease. Usually those companies offer things such as installing charging for your business, such as providing information that will help you operate the vehicles most effectively. I think most people here realize that everybody knew how to operate a diesel. It's a little different now, the way you drive it, the planning your routes and so forth. They will provide service. I mean, again, there is my understanding of many of these companies is there are various packages that you can get that will do various different things for you. Additionally, there are things such as just because I mentioned truck as a service, I'll mention charging as a service. That is a similar idea, only installing charging. Again, most of that charging right now that those companies would work on would probably be for a fleet rather than public charging. But I think that these are the kind of discussions that the members of this group can have with those companies and say, look, there's a big market here. And I've told some of these companies in the past, and they typically get pretty excited when I tell them about just the volume of vehicles crossing at places like Otay Mesa and Calexico. So I think that's something that this group could really do. I also have a really brief question. I'd love to get the answer to, because I don't know exactly, and I've heard some different things. I believe it was Alfonso earlier that mentioned either buying the truck in Mexico or buying it in the United States and then paying duties. What kind of duties are involved here? What are the costs for importing that truck back to Mexico? And does it make a difference if the vehicle is completely or mostly made in North America? So the parts, I know there's a lot of the trade agreements that may come into play. Does anybody have any insight into that?
The duties normally are not going to be per se a issue under the commercial treaty we're in, the TEMEC. Normally that's going to be zero duties. So that's not a problem. The problem is getting finance for that truck that's coming from US and being able to get the truck cost after the grants or the incentives have been applied. U.S. Finance company normally do not finance entities based in Mexico. They finance entities based in U.S. So I'm talking about trucks, or we're discussing trucks being imported into Mexico by Mexican trucking companies. So we kind of fall into a gray area, because we are not clear as to how we're going to be able to do it. We're going to pursue getting the trucks in California with California dealers because of the incentives. But how are we? Normally, we finance those trucks. We very seldom we are able to pay cash on 5 or more units. We need to be financially supported.
Sure.
So that's one of the
Jael mentioned an entity called NADBank that's been in the discussion, and there are others.
Can you repeat, please?
Yes, I was saying that Jael had mentioned an entity called NADBank, which had been in the discussion. Folks such as that may be part of the solution, and again, I think that's a great thing for this group to be able to bring to the table.
I'm not saying.
I'm sorry.
But again, those things aren't at the table where we can talk to them yet. Or I mean,
right.
We are aware that there's an outfit in Texas that might be able to support us. We just need to sit with them and talk to them and see if that possibility can be accomplished.
Sure. All right, and Renee and Jael, thank you for letting me chime in there on that. I'll turn it back to you.
No, thank you. I was just about to tell you, Bruce, this is for you, and then you just jumped in. So thank you. I just to briefly wrap up this, because I guess we need to move to the technology innovation opportunities with Renee, but let's say we need to see everything as a regional issue, not just California, Mexico, because we need everything like infrastructure and incentives and knowledge, communication, everything to be managed as a regional issue. Also, this about incentives very specifically, we need to start talking with this potential financing or potential institutions to get to know what could be possible for both Mexico and California. And thanks, Miguel, for this data and info availability. We need to get to know specific information we're going to seek. And yeah, what Alejandra and Bruce mentioned about the truck service, this is something that we need to explore further, but I guess, Renee, go ahead with the technology and innovation opportunities.
Yeah, just I was captured some comments from you. Just talking about the financing. Maybe the best option here is to make ecosystems between the government, manufacturers, and customers, just to identify what is the best option in this case. For example, in the case of for Mexico, the company of electricity, CFE, is need to plan the infrastructure in Baja California and Sonora and Chihuahua, maybe, just to attend the heavy vehicles, not only the electric light vehicles, because just talking about the charge of the difference between light and heavy duty vehicles is totally different. For example, for for this kind of vehicles, we need to have high voltage. So it's important to have a good infrastructure to comply with the chargers inside, and then just to plan what is the fleet that will attend that operation. That is the situation where it's important to make an ecosystem in order to identify the requirements for the operation. So I think that in the case of financing, when we have let's say the project, or we have the complete plan for the fleet that we will have the operation, we can move to a company for financing, to look for financing, maybe impulse with government incentives, something, I don't know. But at the end, we need to make the complete study before to ask for financing or incentives. It's really very important to understand what is the operation, how is the fleet, because the difference between the technology is really very high. Let's say in Mexico, for example, we have the Asian technology, European technology, American technology. So there are differences in between. So we need to homologate first what is the technology that will attend this market, and then go to customers and companies for electricity in order to identify the best option for the operation.
Yeah. So we're going to, I'm going a step backwards on communication challenge, because I'm thinking that all these ideas and comments and feedback, we can maybe make a make a summary, and put this, Bruce, this is possible to put this like a brief on this session and make it public so everyone can comment later. Is that possible?
Absolutely. Yeah, and you know, we have folks taking notes. We will we will create summary of that. We can post that on the website that, again, we've dropped the link in, which is the website that leads to all of the websites for each of these different groups, including the border. We can put that there. And we can figure out something for some additional input, especially from the panelists. So yeah, that will be great.
Thanks. I don't know what does the other panelists think, but this could be like a good way to keep talking about this, like giving feedback and ideas, and if something comes up, just to make sure we have everything in the same page. So thank you very much.
Totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to bring this very quick on the academic research and data analysis. As I mentioned, in Alianza, we're funding a couple of research on the transition for zero emission vehicles, both in light duty vehicles and the medium and heavy duty vehicles. So the idea here is that if we identify any information or any support or any scientific analysis or data, or just to making things moving faster, this is an opportunity for us to identify this and move to have another research, and maybe with us, of course, but there's a lot of people there doing research on the CEF, from the battery or the grid capacity or the technology or the financing schemes. I mean, this could be like the best way, or we can take this opportunity. This is an opportunity to identify academic research needs and opportunities. So please, anytime you see something like we do not have enough knowledge on this topic, or we do not know enough information, and you think academia could be a help, you know, let us know. We can figure out how to move this into a new research project. I don't know if you want to say something. Israel just mentioned they're working on this. I guess it's with UABC, Israel, that they're making this analysis and also research. So this could be a good way to move forward with when things are not available yet.
You know, I'd like to throw in there, JL. That was a really good commentary, and we're actually getting close to the end of the meeting. We still have some time for discussion, but that last part of the meeting will be wrap up, and I think maybe it's a good time to mention maybe what will be a little part of that wrap up. First of all, I really like what Renee said about looking at this as an ecosystem. You know, how do we connect the pieces from different parts of Mexico and different parts of the United States? And a lot of that comes down to this research and studies that are being done. Again, going back to as JO mentioned, Israel's study, the study that's going on there. How do we incorporate that information and new information that we might need, which is, you know, really what Gio was just talking about, I think, more than anything, is that new information. How do we combine that data? How do we combine those recommendations and make these things happen, working with the with private industry that may really want a part of of bringing in truck as a service, charging as a service, the vehicles, selling more vehicles in Mexico, whatever the case is. And I've heard a lot of good discussion that's starting to get towards that today. So I'm encouraged that that's what we're hearing, is how to put those things together. And all of the possible creative things that could come out of this group. We're talking about infrastructure. It doesn't need to necessarily just be tapping into the grid somewhere. How do you modify, or I should say, how do you supplement the grid? I think there's probably a lot of space for things such as solar power, certainly in Southern California and northern Mexico. How does that integrate in? So I just wanted to throw that in because, again, we're kind of getting near that wrap up time, and I thought that might be a good time to wrap that piece together. So Renee, Gio, back to you guys.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Go ahead, Alfonso.
I understand that the time is ending for the meeting. Just one concern that I have from the tracking standpoint. Normally, when we move one load across the border, we have one customer, one bill of lading. What I have seen with the Amazons and the UPSs and the Costcos and all those big people that handle what we call LTL or packages, they are able to offset the difference in cost with or without incentives of the tractor between X amount of bill of lading that they move on the life of the truck, which is normally 4 to 5 years. We are going to have to offset our sale price by the amount of bill of lading that we move. All right, so this SEP truck, possibly not on the first stage because we're going to get incentives, but when you have to replace a zero emission truck in the next 4 or 5 years, you're going to have to pay full price for the truck, I guess. So it's going to affect the cost of things that we're buying, and it's going to affect our price of sale, and it will move the market quite a bit. That's my concern from the trucking origins and activity that I have. We don't know how much it's going to be electricity. There's a whole lot of things that need to fall and have a price tag for us to say we're going to be able to swallow it, or we need to do this, and that in order to comply and keep moving forward. So those are just concerns that we have and possibly are going to come onto our tables in the near future. Thank you.
No, thank you. I do agree. I don't know if you turn on your camera. Do you want to add something? Because this is something on your knowledge as well.
Yeah, thank you, Yael. As you just mentioned, before we take any actions to work on how we're going to move, because there are a lot of questions like where we're going to get the money, how we're going to input all the infrastructure. We have to have a market impact locally. That's why we ask the local Baja government, and I really encourage to work very close on this committee on the Mexican side, where AMPAC it's been involved since the beginning, and some of the OEMs, to see all the questions that we're going to face on the transition, as far as the question every trucker has at the border is, how we going to manage all this economical impact in the next 5 to 10 years? And that's really questions that we don't have yet answers. And I see very positive that we are discussing about all these topics and see what the data we have. And the study already done by the Mexican Baja government with the University of Baja, the UABC, it's really important to understand where we are and what the challenges, the big challenges we're gonna face. So I think on this committee and in these meetings, we need to involve the Mexican party from the state to see what the route is going to be, for example, with the CFE, which is like the San Diego Gas and Electric counterpart, what they're going to do to increase the capacity, what's going to be the price that we're going to be buying the power from them compared with California. And same as Mr. Sker mentioned, we have so many questions and how we want to compete with one economy to another, having incentives in California and not having incentives in Mexico. So the route is being built. I mean, we are building this route with the California government, Baja California government, and necessarily needs to be very tied to the California CARB regulations to make sure that everybody goes smooth in certain time. And I see very, very complicated to be on time on this changes or this actions if we don't move quick. So especially from the Mexican side. So I really look forward to have more people involved since the optic from the gas power generation and financing to see how we're gonna go forward. That's all. Yeah. Thank you.
No, thank you. I do agree, definitely agree on the need to bring Baja California government into the conversation, because a lot of the concerns and topics we have been discussing has to do with infrastructure that is on the government side, or electricity capacities, or prices, incentives. So yeah, this is maybe something we need to emphasize here, the need to involve everyone. Rene said this is an ecosystem, and definitely both governments in California and Mexico need to be involved. Yes. So I don't know if anyone else has a question, a comment, want to bring something into the table before we move. I guess we need to move to the wrap up part of the meeting, because we just have 20 minutes left. Is that right, Bruce? Maybe we can, yeah. Here we are.
You know, I hate to stifle too much conversation. If someone else does have a comment, yes, we do need to move to that wrap up within the next few minutes, but I can do whatever you guys want.
If I may, Bruce, the other concern is not only the incentives and the cost, but the supply. Normally, our drivers that cross the border solely cross the border back and forth, start in Mexico with the truck and the load, and come on into US, drop it, pick up another one, go back, and so on. So if Mexico does not supply enough power to feed the chargers for these tractors or trucks, then the trucks are going to have to stay in US to be charged. So it triggers another concern, moving drivers back and forth, and that has developed some problem with CBP when drivers are crossing the border.
Sure.
So I mean, it's a very entangled situation, and the small letters on the back of these are quite big.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. You know, and Alfonso, thank you for that. And can I ask another question? I've got a lot of experts on the line. Alfonso, you're one of them. We've got ANPAC, we've got Canacar on the line. We've got folks that know these answers. The way I've typically understood it is that most most of the goods coming from Mexico into California originate from close to the border area. The factories are fairly close to the border. The farms are fairly close to the border. What would you say is an average, and not including what happens on the California side? And I know many of the vehicles only operate in the commercial zones, and I know though that many also travel outside of those commercial zones. But in Mexico itself, what is kind of a typical amount of miles traveled back to, let's say, wherever you're picking up a load? Alfonso,
Well,
you do that?
in my eyes, and possibly Israel can help me on this one. The zones where we are crossing tell you the story. Crossing through San Diego or through Calexico into Tijuana or Mexicali, very likely 90% of the trucks will go into the Mexican border city and come back to US. Nogales is different because the biggest chunk of the loads come from Hermosillo, Obregón, and Guaymas, and Sinaloa. El Paso, main Mexico, Chihuahua, and a big chunk of assembly lines in Juarez. But if you go to Laredo, possibly the numbers are bigger on the shippers within the inner parts of Mexico than the border.
Sure.
We also have, that has to do with how we operate. If we switch tractors, if we have road tractors in Mexico, or we send the people direct, it's quite complex how each carrier and their customers are set up.
Right.
We have customers in Ensenada that want to see the cross-border tractor in their plants in Ensenada, for example. And those guys ship something like 6 to 8 loads a day.
Sure.
So we need to, so I mean, it's different.
And I can add in that, Bruce, out of the 90% that Mr. Sker just mentioned of trucks coming from the south to cross the border, 90%, 85 to 90% are for exportation into the United States. But we have a big amount of trucks coming from San Quintin, which is a long haul with perishables coming with all the tomatoes and strawberries coming straight from there, driving for about 300 to 350 kilometers from there to get into the border at night, so they can cross the border and they can switch trucks. I mean, they are coming straight from there, and I would say maybe the 15% of the fleet, it's this kind of trucks coming from Ensenada or coming from San Quintin.
Thank you, Israel. Thank you. All right, we should now, I think, wrap up. We've got about 15 minutes left. Would you, Brianna, go to that? Perfect. There you are. Great. All right. So first of all, just wanted to address a couple of things before we really go into this part of the wrap up, and some of what I've already talked about anyway. I think one thing, and we've heard about supply of the vehicle and cost of the vehicle, and we know those are real issues now. One thing to bear in mind is that I think this group is is unique in many ways. Infrastructure issues are unique to some extent. Some are the same as what we see in California or anywhere else in the U.S., but then there are some that are unique to Mexico. But another thing that's a little bit unique, I think, about this group is, and I might be generalizing, but I don't think so, is that most of the fleets that are going to be represented here are operating tractors. They're operating, class 7 and 8 full-size semi-trucks, whether that be a day cab or a sleeper cab. And one thing that we have accounted for in most of those larger trucks, now this doesn't include drayage, again, those trucks that are specifically entering or servicing a port or an intermodal rail yard, but outside of drayage, the first deadlines that we really have for these larger trucks are 2027. And that is 2027, that is for day cabs, and I believe it's 2030 for sleeper cabs. So there's a little bit of time. And I mean, I know that's only so meaningful. It doesn't solve all of the problems. But that is something that I think, one thing that we maybe do have. Israel talked about working with the government of Baja. I'm assuming maybe even the federal government, the Mexican federal government, and on our side, working with various government entities. So that gives us a little time. The research that we might need to do, or the data that we might need to gather, that gives us a little bit of time. So let's move into some of these next steps, though. And the first one is future meetings. Currently, as you know now, there are 4 of these groups. Currently, it's planned that these 4 groups will each meet quarterly, so once every 3 months. My first question, and then let me get through the rest of these just real quick, and then I'll open it up. My first question would be, does quarterly sound about right? Do we need to meet 2 months from now? Should we meet 2 months from now and then quarterly after that? Whatever. I'm just throwing open some possibilities. Then how do we want to meet? And really the 3 possibilities is we could do virtual, what we're doing right now. We could do in-person meetings. I will say one thing that might change that a little bit is for state of California employees, it's really difficult to travel to other states. It's even more difficult to get approval to travel out of the country. So the in-person meetings would most likely be on the US side, or we could do hybrid meetings where we could set up an in-person venue and also broadcast it virtually. Technically, we think we can do that. We shouldn't have a problem, but I can't promise any of those things yet. But I'd like some input from the group on how often we should meet and how we should meet. Anyone?
Alejandra just wrote here that her suggestions quarterly and virtually, as long as we have a form to follow up in between meetings. Yeah, if this is a vote, yeah, quarterly sounds great also for me. Glenn, do you want to go?
Well, and I saw before that, I saw Israel said hybrid would be great, which works well for virtual anyway. I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
So Bruce, the question for the team is there a deliverable that needs to be delivered by when?
There's not I wouldn't say there's a deliverable just yet. Not that I've heard today. Now, again, that's something in this wrap up I'd like to hear from the group. Did anyone hear what they think should be a deliverable? And it doesn't have to wait for the next meeting. Again, we can communicate as this panel outside of the meeting. We can set up we can exchange emails or whatever.
Well, let me be a bit more clear. Is there a deliverable that we need to deliver to, let's say, the California Air Resources Board by a certain time?
No, not at this point. And I don't expect that that's the way this will be. Again, this isn't so much about modifying the rule. I think the deliverables will be more along the lines of bringing information to the group. We may say next time we meet, hey, you've got to contact, ANPAC. Obviously, you have contacts with manufacturers. In fact, something that ANPAC said earlier, I believe it's Miguel that's on, had said earlier, is contact him. He can provide lists of dealers or OEMs or whatever the case is. I'm not saying that's a deliverable, but that's the kind of thing that could be. Did that help clarify that?
It did, but I guess it also raises a concern from my side is that if we're going to make suggestions or recommendations and changes to support these cross-border community activities, there has to be some outcome that we need to kind of put forward on the table.
You are right.
I without a end date, it's just kind of, am I just being very honest? I'm not quite sure we would be able to accomplish anything.
No, and I agree with that. And maybe I'm just, keying off of what you're saying, too literally. No, I absolutely agree with that. We heard Alejandra early on talk about, is there something that we, the board, can talk about internally. I shouldn't even say internally, about like bringing, maybe we can provide some kind of consultation regarding all of the incentive programs in one place or something like that. I think that right now, today, I think we're kind of learning the kind of things we need to do. I would suggest that maybe as we send notes out to folks, that we can cover deliverables a little bit more in that. And again, I think that'll come even more in future meetings.
Understood. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, Bruce, I
Yes.
have one suggestion that we can meet quarterly, which is good, maybe hybrid or virtual would be good for everybody. And my suggestion is next time, why don't you invite the government, Mexican government state, to give the two deliverables we have already from the study. So see what data they may have also to share with the group. And one of the things that we discussed on the last forum from Emner Baca from the state last week was, if considering all the restrictions from the US government, federal and state, about regulations of trucks crossing the border on regards to the weight, is it possible for CARB to set like a free trade zone for electric trucks because of the weight? One of the concerns that we have is the 10 or 15% of the overweight for the battery will impact the trade between one country and another. So one of the suggestions we mentioned was, what about if on this meeting with you and all the members related on the group, we can think in an option of setting up like a free trade zone to keep, I will not say overweight, but the thing is how we don't lose weight capacity or loading capacity from the battery weight standpoint. I mean, how can we just save? Because that's going to be like one of the reasons why people won't try to move to electric, because they're overweight. If we lose 10 or 15% of weight capacity, that's going to be a big headache. So if there's any kind of like restricted zone for the Mexican carriers to cross the border, let's say with the same legal weight that we have today, with an electric truck, which is heavier.
Right. No, and that, I mean, and that is a great question. Now, would CARB have the ability to, I mean, do we have the authority to do that? I don't think we would. However, I mentioned earlier that bringing government entities, whether it be, you know, especially those California government entities, to the table, that might be something that we can, you know, can facilitate. And there already is, I believe it's about 2,000 pound additional weight allowed by Department of Transportation in California. I think the Federal Department of Transportation allows even more than that. So those are the kind of things. That's a great suggestion, Israel. You know, what can we do, you know, to facilitate that, if anything? We are just about to the end of our time here. Maybe just briefly, Jael, is there anything on academic inclusion that you want to throw out as a next step?
I think I have said this during my presentation and comments. We're open to hear any inquiries, needs as a group. For example, we did have this workshop. I guess you attended, Bruce, in Riverside early this year. A lot of you attend, Miguel, people from Ampac, Israel. So from the outputs of that workshop, the researchers on CSERT start working on this new project, which were the main questions or info that was needed and the concerns from all the attendees. So this came up, this new research. So yeah. I'm saying maybe from this trig group, border community group discussions, we identify another need from academia. So please keep that in mind, and we can move forward and start thinking on inviting, for example, a researcher from UC, from the ITS, or from CSERT, or from the economic side or the market side or the technical aspects. I mean, you see, it's a very wide system. So please keep that in mind, and we can move forward trying to figure out if we can support any other research here.
Thank you, Gio. And actually that is a great segue into kind of this last couple of bullet points here. And again, we are very close to our time, but getting information to the group, and I'm going to combine that with topics for future meetings. And we've heard things, we heard suggestions like, maybe have the government of Baja come and present information to this group next time, or how do we incorporate some of this other data and information in. What I'm going to suggest is that we CARB, my staff and I, sit down first and kind of work on how to start getting that info. I think the first thing we're going to do is send emails to you folks, right, and say, hey, let's follow up on some of this. Now maybe we will be able to set up on the website or something somewhere a place for information to flow, for more ideas to flow in. People aren't going to think of everything on this call. I'd love for people to submit topics for future meetings. And again, give us a little bit of time to figure out the best way to do that. And right now, before we go, I'm going to take any suggestions on how to do that. Does anyone have a suggestion on, does email seem to be the best? I think that we'll want to post a lot of these things on the website at a minimum once we take the information in. But does anybody have any parting thoughts about how to get the information out?
I guess, yeah, for communication within the group, the email thread is a good idea. We can follow up there, and even before the next meeting, in this email thread, suggest topics for the next meeting, and so we can get prepared before. And for communicating this, I guess, as I mentioned in the beginning of the meeting, we can have like a brief summary. Not
yes,
just like who attended, what were the main topics that we brought into the discussion, ideas and feedback, and just upload it to the page, the CARB or the trig page. I don't know if you think this is a good idea.
No, I think that's perfect. I think that's exactly what we should do. And you're right. We'll start with that email back and forth, refine what we need to do. Do we develop a separate place for us to communicate? I don't know. Maybe email is just fine. But then I think you're right that there are things that we should put onto the website, such as the attendees, such as a brief summary, such as the main topics. And I forget who it was that talked about or that asked about action items. We can also put some things on there that maybe are or are not action items this moment, but even if they're not, they could turn into that. So we will we'll regroup internally, get all our notes together and so forth, and then we'll contact everybody here and move forward on that. All right, everybody, we are a couple minutes past our time. I am going to say thank you very much. It was a really, really great conversation. And I know, this is the first meeting. That's usually the one where the ideas kind of are hardest to come by. You guys will now think about all of this stuff. I think we'll get some really cool feedback through email, and then especially in the next meeting. All right, everybody. With that, I'm going to say thank you and have a good afternoon wherever you are. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Great week. Thank you very much.
Thank you.